Welcome to True Echo, where real stories hit harder than fiction. Today's tale begins not with a hero in a cape, but a man in dusty boots, posing as a customer in the very empire he built from the ground up. A black CEO walks into his own dealership undercover, and freezes when he hears the man behind him being scammed. What follows is a confrontation that exposes corruption, restores justice, and reminds us that integrity doesn't need a title. Stick around. Because this isn't just about trucks, it's about truth. The midday sun baked the pavement in front of Summit Auto Works, its shimmering rays casting a dazzling sheen over the rows of polished trucks. From a distance, the dealership was a beacon of prosperity, sharp signage, glossy chrome, flags fluttering with patriotic charm. But parked in the shadow of a crumbling gas station across the street sat an old Dodge Ram that had long since seen better days. Behind its wheel sat a man who had seen far better days himself, or so it seemed. Solomon Reed adjusted the brim of his sweat-stained cap and watched. In his early 40s, he looked every bit the working-class contractor he claimed to be. His flannel shirt was faded, jeans frayed at the cuffs, boots scuffed by imaginary years of hard labor. Even the slight limp he practiced when walking was intentional, everything part of a carefully designed disguise. No one looking at him now would guess that he was the founder and CEO of Summit Auto Works, a multi-million-dollar dealership chain with locations across 4 states. And that was exactly the point. He wasn't here as Solomon today. He was Marcus Taylor, construction worker, cash buyer, and potential victim of a scam that had been quietly festering under his own roof. It had started small, customer reviews that didn't quite sit right. Then complaints about unexpected fees, aggressive upselling, and broken promises. Solomon had asked his compliance department to investigate. They'd come back clean. But he knew better. He knew a rot when he smelled one. And he wasn't going to trust anyone else to root it out. He stepped from the truck, the sun casting long shadows behind him as he walked toward the lot. As he approached the entrance, a young salesman emerged with all the energy of a well-trained pouncer. Shirt tucked in too tight, belt shining a bit too bright, and a grin stretched just wide enough to feel phony. "Morning, sir," the salesman called. "Looking for something tough or something pretty?" Solomon gave him a half-smile, slow and deliberate. "Name's Marcus. Been saving up. Need a work truck that'll take a beating and still ask for more. No frills. Just grit." "Right this way," said the salesman, who introduced himself as Damien. He seemed nice enough, eager, maybe even genuine, but Solomon knew better than to trust first impressions. He followed Damien past a row of Ford and GMC trucks, the scent of rubber and fresh wax mixing in the air. "This one here," Damien said, gesturing proudly to a 2021 Sierra 1500 V8, "is a beast. Towing capacity off the charts. Only 41,750 on the sticker, but we've got incentives that might get you closer to 40. "Incentives, huh?" Solomon replied, narrowing his eyes. "That include that Summit protection package I've been hearing about?" Damien hesitated, just for a blink, but Solomon caught it. "Yeah, it's sort of standard now. Comes with all the trucks. Covers dents, tires, roadside, all that." Solomon leaned in, examining the price sticker. It didn't list the package. It didn't list much of anything useful, in fact. "That price before or after the package?" "Technically before," Damien admitted. "But we roll it in as part of our peace of mind promise." Solomon nodded slowly. Just what he feared. Upsell by omission. Deception baked into the sales script. He opened the driver's side door, took a seat, and breathed in the sterile new car smell. All air freshener and no substance, just like the deal he was about to be offered. "Mind if I pop the hood?" Damien obliged. As Solomon stepped out and examined the engine, he noticed the salesman glance twice toward the showroom. Once briefly, and the second time with just a little too much anxiety. Solomon followed the glance. Behind the glass stood a man with slicked back hair, arms crossed, watching like a hawk in a vest, Eli Carter, the sales manager. Sharp suit. Sharper eyes. The man Solomon suspected of being the rot at the dealership's core. Eli didn't blink. He just watched, cold and calculating. Solomon straightened up and shut the hood. "Let's take her for a spin." "Sure thing," Damien said, and together they drove a short loop through nearby streets. Damien made small talk, about financing, bonuses, how helping customers achieve their dreams helped him get his monthly incentives. It was all rehearsed. Solomon nodded, smiled, asked vague questions, and memorized every word. By the time they returned, Solomon's mind was made up. The corruption wasn't theoretical. It was operational. And he wasn't even at the contract table yet. The moment Solomon stepped back into the chilled interior of the showroom, the atmosphere changed. The lot had felt open, sunlight, air, possibility. But inside, under LED lights and glassy floors, it felt colder. Controlled. Calculated. A place designed to pressure, not invite. Damien led him to a desk in the corner, situated close to the office with a frosted glass door labeled Eli Carter, Sales Manager. Solomon sat, scanning his surroundings while keeping his body language casual, his voice quiet. Damien tapped away at his keyboard. "All right, Mr. Taylor. So the Sierra comes in at $41,750. Now, with our Summit Protection Package, processing fees, and documentation charges, that brings the total to." He paused. Solomon caught the shift immediately. A slight hitch in the salesman's breath. Not a mistake in the math, something else. A fear of overplaying the game. "What kind of fees we talkin' about?" Solomon asked calmly, his hands folded over his worn jeans. Before Damien could answer, another voice rose in the quiet hum of the showroom. Tense. Breaking. "And I'm telling you, that's not what we agreed on." The voice belonged to a man at the next desk over. Mid-50s, thinning hair, blue work shirt stained at the collar. His hands gripped a folder, the edges of its contents crumpled and curled from the pressure. A photograph had slipped out, a birthday picture. 3 children. 1 cake. And a father who had clearly sacrificed to give them that moment. Solomon turned his head slightly. He didn't want to look like he was eavesdropping, but something about the man's voice, that tired desperation, pulled at an old nerve. The salesman with the man, clearly younger and trying to appear authoritative, offered stiff explanations. "That's the final quote, sir. It includes the adjusted market price and the mandatory protection plan." "That's not what your guy told me on the phone," the man protested. "Josh said $35,000 flat. That's what I brought. That's all I have. I got 3 kids. My oldest just got into college." Solomon's jaw tightened. The name Josh meant something. That was the name mentioned in earlier complaints, someone who'd been let go. Now he knew why. Then Eli Carter's door opened. The manager stepped out with the ease of someone who'd done this dance too many times. Tailored suit, polished shoes, smile like a scalpel. "Mr. Miller," he said, calm and unbothered, "as I've explained, all fees are documented. Market adjustment, summit protection, delivery prep. It's all in the fine print." The older man's face twisted in disbelief. "But we agreed." "Verbal discussions are non-binding," Eli cut in smoothly. "The signed agreement is what counts. If you're unable to provide the additional funds by Friday, the deposit is forfeit." Solomon's stomach turned. He recognized the look on the man's face, that helpless, hollow stare. He'd seen it on his father once, long ago. When a handshake deal turned to dust. When the truck they'd needed became the debt they could never escape. It was that day, more than any business class or startup seminar, that made Solomon promise himself that if he ever ran a dealership, it would be different. It would be honest. Now here he was, watching a man crumble under the same weight his father once bore, inside a showroom with Solomon's own name on the founding plaque. Gregory Miller, he caught the name from the folder, stood slowly, gathered his wrinkled papers, and picked up the photo. His fingers shook as he placed it back in the folder. "You got two choices," Eli said with finality. "Pay or walk." Solomon's fists clenched under the table. But he didn't move. Not yet. He needed the system exposed, not just one confrontation. He turned back to Damien, who was now visibly uncomfortable. "Actually," Solomon said in a slow drawl, "before we wrap this up, think I'll need a full breakdown. Every line. Don't want no surprises like that man got." Damien nodded, swallowing hard. "Of course." He began reworking the numbers, this time slower, less rehearsed. Solomon leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something, Damien. That protection plan. That's really mandatory now?" The salesman glanced around. Lowered his voice. "Look, off the record." He hesitated. "It's not really mandatory. But Carter wants us to present it like it is. He says it boosts profits. That people don't push back once they're emotionally attached to the truck. Sounds shady." Damien sighed. "It is. The first price you hear. Never the last. Josh, the guy who promised that $35,000 deal. He didn't play along. He got fired. Officially, they called it performance. But everyone knows why." Solomon didn't react. He just tapped the inside of his flannel pocket, confirming what he already knew. The voice recorder had caught every word. Across the showroom, a new couple walked in, young and hopeful, maybe first-time buyers. Solomon watched the same pattern repeat itself, the compliments, the laughter, the promise of a deal too good to be true. He turned to Damien. "Mind if I use the restroom?" "Sure. Down the hall to the right." But Solomon didn't go straight there. He walked slowly, making a quiet detour through the dealership. Past the customer lounge where a farmer puzzled over a contract, muttering, "Never heard of that fee before." Past the break room where two finance officers chuckled, "He didn't even blink when we added the paint sealant. Poor guy's gonna read the fine print a week too late." Solomon's chest burned. It wasn't just Eli. It wasn't just one bad egg. It was baked in, systemic. Rot that had spread deep. He returned to Damien's desk and sat, not with suspicion anymore, but with purpose. "Let's keep going," he said, staring down at the bloated contract Damien had printed. "I want every charge explained. In writing." But inside, Solomon Reed knew this part of the investigation was over. He had enough. He'd seen behind the curtain. And the man pulling the levers was about to be unmasked. Inside the glass-walled office, the air felt artificially calm. The soundproofing couldn't completely muffle the hum of the showroom outside, but within these walls, Eli Carter controlled the script. Solomon stepped in, head lowered just enough to maintain his cover. He kept the slow gait, the cautious energy of a blue-collar buyer who didn't want trouble, just a straight deal. Eli gestured toward the leather chair across from his oversized desk. "Have a seat, Mr. Taylor," he said smoothly, a practiced smile on his lips. "Damien said you had a few questions about the price breakdown. I'd be happy to walk you through it myself." Solomon sat, removing his cap and setting it in his lap. "Yeah," he said, keeping his voice slow, a little gravelly. "Wasn't expectin' all them add-ons. And I sure wasn't expectin' what happened to that fella next to me, Mr. Miller." Eli gave a chuckle, dry and performative. "Ah. Yes. Mr. Miller." He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Unfortunately, not everyone understands the business side of things. We do our best to educate buyers, but at the end of the day, they sign what they sign." Solomon's hands rested on his thighs, fists lightly clenched. Seems like he didn't know what he was signing. Maybe not, Eli replied, shrugging. But that's not our fault. We provide everything in the paperwork. If customers choose not to read it, well, we can't hold their hands. Solomon leaned forward slightly. And what about that Summit protection package? Damien said it's optional. You told Mr. Miller it was required. There it was again, that microsecond pause, the tightening of the jaw. Then, Eli's smile returned. We recommend it strongly. It's part of our value proposition. Look, Mr. Taylor, most folks aren't just buying trucks, they're buying peace of mind. The protection plan gives them that. Solomon narrowed his eyes just enough. And how much do they pay for that peace? Eli tapped a manila folder on his desk. Depends. But that's not really the point. What matters is what they feel when they drive off the lot. He rose from his chair and walked to the window, looking out over the showroom with something between arrogance and reverence. You see those people out there? They come in thinking they need horsepower. But what they really want is pride. Stability. Identity. And we give it to them. Solomon stood too, slower, deliberate. Even if it costs more than they were told. Eli turned, his expression shifting from charm to challenge. You're asking a lot of questions, Mr. Taylor. What exactly do you do for a living again? Haul and repair, Solomon said, still in character. Run my own outfit outside Statesville. Learned early, if a man's word don't mean much, neither does his business. Eli's eyes glinted. This isn't about words. This is about survival. You think we survive on MSRP and handshakes? Nah. We survive on knowing how people tick. People think they can afford $35,000. We show them $45,000, and a dream. Some can't handle that. But most? They cave. That's how you win. There was no remorse in Eli's voice. Just efficiency. Precision. The pride of a man who thought he had outsmarted the system and now lectured about it freely. And then he overplayed his hand. Besides, he added with a chuckle, it's not like corporates watching. Read? That guy's a fossil. A name on the wall. Hasn't stepped foot in this location in what, 2 years? He's too busy cutting ribbons and shaking hands. Meanwhile, I'm the one turning this place into a gold mine. Solomon didn't move. His breath was steady. But his mind was boiling. Eli's smirk grew. I've buried more complaints in the last 6 months than I can count. You know how easy it is to delete a paper trail when the trail starts with paper. Then he opened his desk drawer, casually pulling out a thin folder. But hey, if you're willing to work with me, Mr. Taylor, maybe we can make some of those pesky fees disappear. Cash consideration, of course. You scratch my back, I'll cut that protection package clean out. The room went dead quiet. Solomon reached into his shirt pocket. Slowly. Calmly. The digital recorder was warm in his hand. He pressed stop. Then play. Eli's words spilled back into the room in his own voice, the bragging, the deception, the casual corruption. Eli froze. What is that? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. Solomon looked up. And for the first time, he let the disguise fall. The easy southern drawl was gone. The slumped shoulders straightened. The quiet eyes now burned with focused fury. My name, Solomon said, standing fully, is Solomon Reed. Founder and CEO of Summit Auto Works. And you just confessed to everything I needed to hear. Eli's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Solomon stepped forward, eyes locked. You called me a fossil. A puppet. Said I wouldn't care. Let me tell you something, Carter, I built this place with my hands, my sweat, and my father's code, treat every customer like their family. And you spit on that. He turned and walked to the door. "You're done here." "Wait, Mr. Reed, Solomon, just let me explain," Eli stammered, the confident mask now completely shattered. "It was business. That's all, just business." Solomon turned back one last time. "No. That wasn't business. That was theft. And now it's over." Solomon stepped out of Eli Carter's office with the quiet authority of a man who had finally seen enough. The door didn't slam behind him, it clicked shut like the last line of a contract. He walked straight toward the central intercom console, bypassing the receptionist, the sales desks, and the whispers already beginning to swirl. With one press of a button, the dealership speaker system came to life, his voice booming across the showroom, the finance offices, and the customer lounge. "All staff to the showroom floor immediately. This is Solomon Reed." A beat of silence. Then footsteps. Doors opened, chairs scraped back, conversations halted mid-sentence. Employees emerged with stiff backs and uncertain expressions. Some wore confusion. Others, recognition and dread. After all, many had never seen the man in person, but everyone knew the name. Solomon Reed. The founder. The face etched on the dedication plaque at the entrance. The man who was supposed to be shaking hands with senators, not walking through the front door in dusty jeans and work boots. Eli trailed behind him, pale and disoriented, like a man freshly pulled from a burning house who still hadn't realized the fire started in his own hands. Solomon stood near the center of the showroom, under the glow of overhead LEDs. The trucks behind him gleamed like silent witnesses. Every eye in the room fixed on him. He didn't speak right away. He let the weight of the moment settle like dust on concrete. Then, quietly but clearly, he raised the recorder and pressed play. Eli's voice filled the space. "You think we survive on MSRP and handshakes? Nah. We survive on knowing how people tick. Most folks would rather stretch their budget than admit they got played." Another beat. Then. "Reed? That guy's a ghost. Corporate puppet. I've made more in kickbacks this year than Reed probably makes in legitimate profit." Mouths fell open. Some employees turned to Eli, others stared at the floor. One salesman, near the corner, took a full step backward, as if the words had physically pushed him. Solomon let the clip end. "For those of you who don't know me," he began, his voice calm but sharp, "I'm Solomon Reed. I started Summit Auto Works 15 years ago with my own money, with one truck, and with one mission, to build a dealership people could trust. I swore I'd never run a place that preyed on desperation or tricked good folks out of their savings." He looked around the room, locking eyes with faces old and new. "What I've seen today, what I've heard, breaks that promise." He pointed directly at Eli. This man manipulated contracts, buried complaints, and sold fear dressed up as policy. He mocked every value this company was built on. And he did it with a smile. Eli stepped forward, voice shaking but still holding a sliver of arrogance. "You don't understand, Solomon. It's how the game is played now. It's what customers expect." "Touch your computer," Solomon cut in, "and I'll have you arrested for destruction of evidence. Our IT team is backing up everything, emails, contracts, recordings. Every customer complaint you buried is about to be unburied." He turned to the two security guards by the entrance. "Escort Mr. Carter off the premises. He is terminated effective immediately. Do not let him touch another document." The guards moved. Eli panicked. "You think this place runs on honesty?" he spat as they grabbed his arms. "Good luck with your margins, Reed. You'll be out of business in a year." Solomon didn't even look at him. "I'd rather make an honest dollar than steal 100. As Eli was let out, silence returned. Then, slowly, Solomon faced the remaining staff. "I know some of you were part of this," he said. "I also know some of you tried to fight it and got punished. Starting today, that ends. He took a step forward, his presence no longer cautious. I'm freezing all sales. Every contract from the last 6 months will be reviewed. If you helped orchestrate this scheme, come forward now, truthfully, and we'll talk. If you stay silent and we find your fingerprints, you're out. And if you retaliated against honest employees, we'll see you in court. The silence was deep. Then, unexpectedly, a voice cut through. I told him it was wrong. It came from a woman near the back. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, steady stance. My name's Trina. I've been here 5 years. When I refused to lie to customers, he moved me to inventory. Said I wasn't a closer. Solomon nodded, his eyes softening for the first time that day. Thank you, Trina. That ends today. Another voice followed. Damien. Hands shaking, he stepped forward. I kept records, he said. I didn't know how to stop him. But I didn't delete anything. I've got a flash drive. Every deal I was forced to manipulate, every fee we added after verbal quotes. More voices joined in. Some trembling. Some firm. A few confessed. A few defended the ones who had tried to do right. But one thing was clear, a dam had broken. And through it flowed the truth. Then, the door opened again. Slowly. Gregory Miller stepped in, holding the same wrinkled folder in both hands. I came back, he said quietly, voice raw. Hoped someone would listen. Solomon walked toward him, steady and sure. Mr. Miller, he said with a nod. You're getting your truck. Original price. Every hidden fee wiped clean. Your deposit safe. Gregory's mouth fell open slightly. He tried to respond, but Solomon kept going. And your daughter? Solomon added. Summit Auto Works will fund a full scholarship in her name. I failed you once. I won't do it again. Gregory's hands shook. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was gratitude. The room went still again, not tense, but something new. Something rare. Hope. The day after the confrontation, Solomon arrived at Summit Auto Works before the sun. The lot was still dark, but the work had already begun. He stood alone under the dealership sign, staring at the building he once loved. It had taken him 15 years to build this place, and just one day to discover how far it had fallen. But he wasn't here to mourn. He was here to rebuild. The first thing he did was unlock the main office and remove the framed Sales Excellence awards from the walls. He placed them gently in a box, then carried it to the back and tossed the entire thing in the recycling bin. Symbols of a corrupt past didn't belong in the future he planned to create. By 8 a.m., the first staff meeting in dealership history was underway in the showroom. No desks. No scripts. No suits. Solomon stood in front of the entire team, in jeans and a black polo, sleeves rolled. Not a CEO giving a speech, but a leader laying bricks for something new. Here's how this is going to work, he said, his voice strong but not raised. Every single contract from the last 6 months will be reviewed. Every customer who paid more than they were quoted will be contacted. Personally. By me. He held up a thick printout of names. We're starting here. If you've got information, speak up now. If you participated but are ready to make it right, we'll have that conversation. If not, I suggest you pack your desk. No one moved. Then Trina stepped forward again. I've already begun reviewing contracts, she said. The Summit Protection Package was added to nearly every sale, even when customers declined. I've marked every instance. 47 so far. Solomon nodded. You're now head of customer advocacy. She blinked. What? You've got integrity. And that's the only credential I care about right now. The murmurs in the room grew louder. Some were encouraged. Others weren't so sure. One man, a finance officer named Marvin, raised his hand. "What if people come after us legally? I mean, if this goes public?" Solomon didn't blink. "Then we own it. We face it. And we fix it." And that's exactly what he did. Over the next several days, Solomon made calls, dozens of them. Some customers shouted. Some cried. A few hung up on him. But others thanked him through tears. Gregory Miller, for instance, came back to pick up his truck. This time, he signed one single page, no hidden fees, no pressure. Solomon met him personally at the front of the lot. "I thought this kind of stuff only happened in movies," Gregory said as he climbed into the driver's seat. "Sometimes the movie just needs a rewrite," Solomon replied. Word spread. Local newspapers picked up the story. CEO goes undercover to expose his own dealership's corruption. A journalist called Solomon's effort the most honest scandal in the industry. He didn't care for the attention, but the spotlight was useful. He brought back Josh, the honest salesman who had been fired. Josh returned not just as a salesperson, but as the new training director. Together with Damien and Trina, he rewrote the sales manual from scratch. "We don't sell trucks," Josh told new hires. "We sell trust. Lose that, and you've got nothing." Each sales desk was now equipped with digital tablets displaying live price breakdowns. Every add-on was optional, transparent, and explained in plain English. The Summit Protection Package was redesigned completely, opt-in only, with printed and verbal confirmation required. And customers noticed. Within weeks, positive reviews began to flood in. "I came here expecting the usual dealership runaround," one woman wrote. "But they showed me the numbers before I even asked." Another man posted a video online. "I thought I'd be fighting for every dollar. Instead, Solomon Reed himself sat down with me and made sure I understood every charge." The video went viral. Still, not everyone was on board. 3 senior staff members quit within the first week of reform. One left in a storm, shouting, "You'll tank this place with your morality project." Solomon didn't flinch. "Then go. I'm not building this business for people like you." He wasn't interested in salvaging careers rooted in deception. Instead, he doubled down on creating a culture of honesty. Bonuses were no longer based solely on volume, but on customer satisfaction. He created a tip line for anonymous employee concerns. Every complaint would be reviewed by an independent ethics officer. But perhaps the most powerful moment came 3 weeks later, when a young man in his 20s walked into the dealership with a trembling hand and an envelope. "I saw your story," the man said. "My dad bought a truck here 6 months ago. He died last month. We found his contract, and I don't think he understood what he signed." Solomon opened the envelope. The contract had been altered. Fees scratched in after the signature line. Classic Eli Carter handiwork. Solomon looked the young man in the eye. "We'll refund the difference. Fully. And we'll dedicate this month's charity outreach in your father's name." The man broke down. That night, Solomon sat alone in the customer lounge, the same place where lies used to thrive. The silence was different now. It wasn't tense, it was clean. The foundation had been cracked open. But from it, something real had begun to grow. It was early September when Solomon Reed announced Community Appreciation Day. There were no gimmicks, no half-truths buried beneath special offers. Just one goal, to thank the people who stood by Summit Auto Works, both staff and customers, through the storm of transformation. Flyers went out. A banner was strung across the lot entrance. Local food trucks were invited. There would be bounce houses for the kids, a scholarship booth, and customer service reps available to review old contracts and offer refunds if needed. Transparency wasn't just part of the event, it was the event. The city buzzed with anticipation. Local news outlets confirmed coverage. Gregory Miller, now an unofficial ambassador for the dealership, even volunteered to speak. His story had become a symbol, not of victimhood, but of restoration. But not everyone was pleased. Behind the scenes, remnants of the old guard simmered. A few former employees who had been fired or pressured out, loyal to Eli Carter's style of profit-first manipulation, were quietly stirring resentment online. 2 days before the event, Summit's official website was hacked. Customers logging on were met with a stark black screen, white letters flashing. "Don't believe the lie. Ask to see the real contract." It was crude, but effective. Panic spread. Calls poured in. Was it all a front? Was Solomon's revival of Summit just another bait-and-switch? Solomon stood in the center of his now transparent glass office and listened to his staff read the complaints. Some wanted to cancel the event. Others suggested going quiet, waiting for the wave to pass. Solomon listened. Then said 2 words, "We double down." He held an emergency press conference in the lot that same evening. No suit. No podium. Just Solomon, standing next to Gregory Miller and Trina, beneath the Summit sign. There was a time, Solomon said, when that message might have been true. But today, if you come to Summit Auto Works, you won't get hidden fees, you'll get every document shown to you before you sign. If you've been wronged in the past, we're fixing it. Not just with words, but with action. And if anyone out there thinks they can scare us back into silence, think again. The next morning, the video had over 2 million views. Support flooded in, even from competitors. On the day of the event, the parking lot filled before 10 a.m. Families laughed. Kids bounced. Customers brought in paperwork from months past, and walked away with refunds or revised warranties. Every time someone stepped up with a complaint, Solomon or Trina sat with them personally. Gregory Miller delivered a short speech beside a photo of his 3 children. "A year ago," he said, "this dealership took from me. Today, it gave me my life back." Then he gestured toward his daughter, now in her freshman year at college, standing nearby with a framed thank you letter that would later be mounted permanently in the showroom. Near the end of the event, a man in dark sunglasses approached the scholarship booth. Late 40s. Nervous hands. He didn't speak, just handed Solomon a folded piece of paper. It was an anonymous letter. Typed. Short. "I helped Eli. I regret it. I deleted records. But I saved one. Check the CRM archive folder named Winter Tires. You'll find everything." The man turned and disappeared into the crowd before Solomon could respond. Back in the office that evening, Solomon opened the archive. The folder was there. Hidden deep within a buried directory. Hundreds of manipulated contracts. Complaints that had been marked resolved without ever being read. Names. Dates. Dollar amounts. Even scripts used to coerce customers into upgrades. It was the smoking gun. He called his legal team. And then, he called the district attorney. Summit Auto Works wasn't just going to rebuild itself. It was going to be part of cleaning up an industry. But in that moment, Solomon didn't feel victorious. He felt sober. Grounded. As if the work had just begun. He stood at the front door and looked out over the lot, now empty except for a few lingering balloons and scattered flyers blowing gently in the evening breeze. This place had once sold lies dressed as luxury. Now, it stood for something different. Not perfection. But principle. And that made all the difference. 6 months later, Solomon Reed sat under the flickering fluorescent lights of a courtroom hallway, dressed in a dark suit that still didn't feel quite like him. His boots tapped softly against the floor, clean, polished, but the soul inside them was still the man who'd worn dusty work jeans and a $12 Casio the day he walked into his own business pretending to be someone else. Inside the courtroom, the state's legal counsel was preparing to deliver opening remarks in a fraud case that had rippled through the entire regional auto sales industry. Eli Carter, along with 2 former finance managers and a partner vendor, stood charged with multiple counts: consumer fraud, evidence tampering, and violation of fair lending practices. Much of the case rested on what Solomon uncovered. The recordings. The files. The anonymous tip that led to the "Winter Tires" archive. And perhaps most importantly, the human stories that followed. Dozens of former customers had testified. Men and women who had been misled, pressured, or outright tricked into contracts that buried them in debt. Each one had found a voice because Solomon gave them a platform. When his turn came to speak, Solomon didn't bring legal language. He brought clarity. "I didn't come here to burn a man," he said, looking directly at the jury. "I came here to stop a rot. To remind an industry that trust isn't a marketing slogan. It's a promise. One you either honor, or you lose everything worth building." After he stepped down from the stand, the courtroom stayed quiet for a long moment. The verdict came weeks later. Guilty on all major counts. Eli Carter was sentenced to 6 years in prison, and barred from holding any management role in any consumer sales business indefinitely. The finance officers each received probation and were ordered to repay their earnings from the fraudulent contracts. But Solomon didn't celebrate. Not publicly. His victory had never been about revenge. It had been about restoration. About the customers who could now breathe again. The employees who no longer feared speaking the truth. The name, Summit Auto Works, no longer whispered with suspicion, but spoken with respect. Over time, his efforts echoed beyond the dealership. The state instituted new consumer protection guidelines for auto dealers. Summit's transparent pricing model was studied at 2 business schools. And Solomon himself, though always reluctant, was asked to speak at industry events. He accepted only one. Standing on a modest stage, he addressed a room full of dealership owners, some curious, others skeptical. "You don't need a hidden fee to make a profit," he said. "You need people to believe in you. And you earn that by giving them nothing to hide from." Afterward, a young owner approached him. "How'd you know where to start?" Solomon smiled. "You don't start with the books. You start with the people." Years passed. Summit grew, not just in revenue, but in impact. A second scholarship program was launched. Former customers became lifelong advocates. Some employees even opened their own businesses, shaped by what they'd learned. Solomon began to step back from daily operations, handing more responsibilities to Trina, Damien, and Josh. The 3 of them, once buried under the weight of a corrupt system, were now the heartbeat of a new legacy. One winter morning, long after the courtroom drama had faded into memory, Solomon sat in the customer lounge with a cup of coffee, watching a young couple test drive a used Ford. He smiled at how familiar it all still felt, how the hum of hope never really changed. The front door opened. A young woman entered, around 20, with the unmistakable fire of someone with purpose in her stride. "Mr. Reed?" she asked. He looked up. "That's me. I'm Tessa Miller. Gregory Miller's daughter. You helped my dad, years ago. You gave me a scholarship." Solomon stood, warmth filling his chest. "You're in college now." "Graduated last spring," she said, smiling. "I start at law school next fall. My dad told me to stop by if I was ever in town. I just wanted to say thank you." He reached out and shook her hand, emotion tightening his throat. "You earned it," he said. "I just made sure the road was clear." She paused, then added, "My first client. I wanted to be someone like you. Someone trying to do good but surrounded by the wrong people." Solomon nodded slowly. "Then you're on the right road already." She left as quickly as she came, leaving behind a silence filled with pride and purpose. Solomon turned back toward the window, watching the snow begin to fall softly over the trucks on the lot. They still gleamed under the winter sun, but not with the illusion of polish. This time, they shone with something deeper. Honesty. Redemption. Trust. He took one last sip of coffee, leaned back in his chair, and whispered to no one in particular. "We don't sell trucks here. We sell second chances." The story of Solomon Reed is more than a corporate shakeup. It's a lesson in how leadership isn't defined by the corner office, but by courage, integrity, and a willingness to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Because when lies are profitable, honesty takes guts. And when the system is broken, it only takes one person to fix it, if they're willing to start at the bottom. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think twice about the power of one voice, one decision, subscribe to True Echo. Share this video, leave a comment, and join the community where truth always finds a way to rise.